Today is another embargo lifting on the RTX 5070 Ti. This time around, it is with the non-MSRP models. Now, I do put quotation marks around that because it's looking like pretty much all these cards in the 5070 Ti range are non-MSRP models. So yesterday we took a look at the Ventus 3X OC, which is apparently meant to come in at $750. But today we've got the Palit Gaming Pro, which is meant to be a little bit more expensive, and I'm told it just varies depending on where you are in the world. But one thing is with the Palit Gaming Pro, it is also apparently an MSRP model for this card. Now, I did see this in Australia with an RTX 5080 Palit Gaming Pro, which did come in at MSRP, believe it or not. I did manage to get one of these cards, but 3 weeks later, I'm still waiting on it. Apparently, it's going to be shipped very soon. So the availability of the RTX 5000 series launch has obviously been one of the messiest launches in the history of NVIDIA graphics cards, to say the least. Anyhow, let's get on to today's comparison. We'll talk about pricing later, where we've got two different recommendations, but you may already see on your screen here, we've got side-by-side comparisons between the Palit Gaming Pro OC model and also the Ventus 3X OC. Now, depending on the title that we're looking at, so we're going to show you Cyberpunk 2077 first, depending on the title, you can get some pretty big gains out of this OC model here. For instance, at 4K, I saw about a 5% uplift in raw performance, and then at 1440p, we saw a 3% uplift in performance. But then moving on to Black Myth Wukong, we saw here a more unimpressive 2% uplift in performance. And at this stage, you may be wondering, what's the difference in this OC itself? And here's where it's got the 1000 millivolt point. This is what I'm going to refer to when I'm talking about the clock speeds on these models going forward. I actually think it's a great reference point. So what we do is we pull up MSI Afterburner, we look at that 1000 millivolt point, and then we look at the corresponding clock speed, and that's going to tell us the maximum speed this can run at that particular voltage level. For instance, the Ventus 3X OC is going to be 2715 megahertz at 1000 millivolt. Then the Gaming Pro from Palit is actually going to be 2790 megahertz at 1000 millivolt. And also, I did ask some other reviewers out there. I managed to get feedback on the Zeus Prime, and apparently the OC model for that is going to be 2790 megahertz as well. So basically, you're getting an extra 75 megahertz, and the memory speeds are all the same across all models of 5070 Ti, at least from what I can tell so far. So a 75 megahertz uplift, that should account for maybe a 2 to 3% uplift most of the time. It shouldn't account for a 5% uplift. So you may be wondering what's going on here with that performance uplift. And here's where it's actually got to do with the performance of the cooler itself, where the Gaming Pro is running cooler and it's also running quieter, but a little bit more on that later. Let's continue on with some of the benchmarks here. Riftbreaker, we score at 1440p, we get a 4% uplift, and then at 4K, only a 2.5% uplift. Then moving on to Warhammer Space Marine 2, it's an opposite scenario here, where the 1440p uplift was only 2.5%, then the 4K uplift was actually 4%. So actually the reversal of what we saw with Riftbreaker. Then with Fortnite, we saw a 2 and 2.5% uplift, so just like Black Myth Wukong. And then for Final Fantasy 16, we saw a 3%, and then at 4K, a 4% uplift in gaming performance. So here's where we've saved the best till last, at least with gaming performance, because we've got two titles here. The first is Dragon Age the Veilguard. Now, in the recent comment section of the Ventus 3X OC, you guys said this game has just gone a particular something. And when I looked at it afterwards, I was like, yeah, they got political with a video game. And I completely agree with you guys in the comments. I really don't want politics coming in to my video game world. It's where I go to get away from all that crap. Now, for why I'm including it in the benchmarks, I'm claiming ignorance. I just got a free code. I'm just benchmarking the first scene of the game, and I didn't know about any of this until now. And so we're just going to use this game for a little bit more benchmarking with a few more of these GPU releases. Then this one is going to get the can. But 1440p, we've got a 5% uplift. And then at 4K, we saw a big 7% uplift in performance between the Palit Gaming Pro over the Ventus 3X OC. Now we're going to quickly talk about why this would get a bigger score here, and I think it has to do with the temperatures, not just on the GPU core itself, but also the memory junction temperatures. Here's where we saw a 10-degree drop roughly in the memory junction temperatures between these two different models. The Palit Gaming Pro staying under 70 degrees, and then the MSI Ventus 3X staying under 80 degrees, but it was a 10-degree difference between the two models in the same ambient temperatures of 23 degrees Celsius. Though the final title that shows the biggest difference in today's benchmarks is Marvel Rivals, and here's where it's so big to the point where The 5070 Ti Gaming Pro OC here, this can beat out the 5080. And this is at 1440p and 4K. Where also compared to the Ventus 3X OC, it scored a 7% uplift at both 1440p and at 4K. So very impressive to see this, and obviously this would come down to the raw clock speeds themselves in relation to what's being utilized in this game. So different games will utilize the GPU in different mannerisms, and so it just happens to be with Marvel Rivals, you're not going to be seeing really any extra benefit to using a 5080 in this game versus a 5070 Ti. So the raw gaming performance numbers are actually quite impressive for the 5070 Ti Palit Gaming Pro, but we'll quickly talk about the DLSS 3 and 4 numbers, as well as the raw ray tracing numbers. And here's where with the ray tracing numbers, we really didn't see much of a difference. And when we did turn on DLSS 3, as well as turning on DLSS 4, 4X mode in particular, that's where you've got 3 artificially generated frames in between each raw data-driven frame. This is where we did see more of a difference, but this ultimately is just being that exaggeration of the original numbers, and you're essentially getting the frame generation to build on that 1 FPS difference, which then becomes roughly 4. Though quickly taking a look at productivity numbers, here's where a Palit Gaming Pro, for instance, will give you some benefits over a Ventus 3X too. So it's not just the gaming performance figures that get an uplift, but also the productivity scores get an uplift too, due to the higher clock speeds. Now, in terms of overclocking, we'll talk about this first in conjunction with undervolting. We'll put this in the same section. Here's where the Gaming Pro did an extremely good job of overclocking. We managed to get an extra 450 megahertz on the core, as well as 1,000 from the memory, but I really didn't notice much of a benefit past 500 megahertz, just like the Ventus 3X. However, this time around, it is important to note that the Gaming Pro did ultimately score a higher clock speed in general, because it's, as we said earlier in the video, it's already plus 75 megahertz higher than the Ventus 3X OC. So ultimately, you'd be getting around plus 500 megahertz as opposed to the Ventus 3X, which was getting 450. But both these cards overclocked extremely well. And here's one of the few cases where I really do like overclocking, because you're getting a lot more performance and you're using up pretty much the same wattage here, especially in the game that we tested at here, Warhammer Space Marine 2, where you're getting around 300 watts usage direct GPU draw. And then that's still at 300 watts for the Gaming Pro. And then the MSI 3X, that was only using up around 7 more watts. So you got an extra heap of performance here left on the table, and you can take advantage of that if you want to overclock and really not see any higher temperatures, as well as any higher wattage from the wall, especially in the case of the Gaming Pro, where the uplift in performance was quite impressive. And then moving on to undervolting, here's where you can drop off the power consumption considerably, depending on which level you wish to choose. I've got 3 different undervolts here that I like to use personally, because I use a mini ITX system. I got the 2.7 gigahertz profile for just general work usage with video editing. Then I got the 2.5 gigahertz profile there for gaming. And then if I really need to keep temperatures down in the summer, for instance, and I don't have the aircon on, I can drop it down to 2.3 gigahertz. Now, ultimately, when it comes to undervolting, I will be updating a new tutorial on RTX 5000 series. I think I'll do this after the 5070 comes through, so I can study the behavior on that and then give you guys the best undervolting guide with RTX 5000 series. And on top of that, the RX 9070 XT should be released at that time. So I'll also include that card in the undervolting guide too, just to give you guys the best use case scenarios for these GPUs, which out of the box, they do leave a lot of headroom on the table, whichever way you wish to go. Then now it's time to talk about the final point before I make a conclusion on the Gaming Pro in particular from Palit, and that is the performance of the cooler itself. Now, here's where the whole card weighs in at over 1.5 kilograms. So versus the Ventus 3X, you're getting roughly 50% extra cooler, and this is making a big difference when it comes to not just the cooling performance, but also especially the noise levels. I'll let you guys take a listen at the 3 different profiles here with the default settings versus the 60% versus the 80%. So for me personally, the default profile was extremely desirable, giving out very low noise, but also keeping the temperatures lower than that of the Ventus 3X, for example. And this is, by the way, with extra performance and lower memory junction temperatures. Then we've got the 60% fan profile, which drops the temperatures even further, but doesn't introduce a whole lot more noise. Then for 80%, you've actually got a considerable temperature drop versus 60%. So if you don't mind noise, you play with headphones on and you want to get the lowest temperatures possible, the 80% is really going to kick it hard too. Though quickly looking at the aesthetics of the card, this is a triple slot cooler and it does come over 33 centimeters long, so you will need a big case to accommodate that. It also comes included with a 2 PCIe 8-pin to 12-volt adapter, and changing over to a 4X adapter, for instance, will not alleviate the power limit of 300 watts, which is also BIOS locked as well, so I can't go over that 300 watt power limit unless I start doing some sort of manual hardware modification, which I don't recommend because you will void your warranty. Also, keep in mind this is a triple slot cooler with 3 DisplayPort 2.1s as well as an HDMI 2.1, and there is a bit of RGB on the side of the card, and there's an RGB 5-volt addressable header. So if your motherboard doesn't have a 5-volt addressable header, you can actually use the GPU. So that's actually a pretty handy feature included in the Gaming Pro. Though keep in mind there is no support bracket included, which the Ventus 3X did include one of those brackets. Now for the aesthetics itself, it's an all black design, except for the RGB, which you can turn off if you wish to, and you do get a dual BIOS, which goes from performance mode to quiet mode, but because the performance mode was already quiet enough, I decided to not even bother testing it because it wasn't necessary. Now one thing Palit did want me to mention in this review is if you don't like the stock look of this card, you can actually change it without voiding your warranty. They do have a 3D printing template that you can download, so if you want to get a different color from the 3D plastic itself, you can do that, or you can paint over that 3D plastic and again, not void your warranty and get a different look with the Gaming Pro. Anyhow, guys, with all that out of the way, it's time to talk about the final thoughts on this card right here, the Gaming Pro from Palit, the 5070 Ti. And what do I think about this card? Well, in general, I think the card itself is extremely impressive. I'm surprised Palit are releasing, at least they're telling me they're releasing an MSRP model that's this good. So whether it's the 5080 or the 5070 Ti, the performance numbers I've seen here out of this card are really stable. The temperatures are low, the noise is low, extremely good implementation of a baseline model. So they get some big props for that. But then we get onto the pricing here, where it's just ambiguous at best. Are we going to see $750 USD models, just like this Gaming Pro on the shelves? And if so, then it's going to be a big win. I'm going to pull up the value charts for you guys, which will explain everything you need to know. If it's at $750, you can see it's a huge win in terms of value increase over the 4080 Super, for example. But then if we look at the $900 price, which a lot of these cards are reported to be coming in at, it's not going to be such a big value increase over the previous 4080 Super. So basically, that's what it's all going to boil down to with the Gaming Pro, just like the Ventus 3X, and that is the value that you're ultimately going to get when you buy one of these cards. If it's coming closer to that $750 price point, even if it's an OC model and it's coming in at say $800 USD, it's going to be okay. But if it's coming over that $900 price point consistently all day, every day, then it's not going to be such a great buy over the 4080 Super. For me personally, in yesterday's video, if you guys want to check that out, I'll put the link up here. I did do a rant on this. I'm honestly exhausted from ranting and getting depressed about this stuff. I want to pick things up and get back to the good stuff and the good experiences I was having with tech outside of these new GPU launches. So with that aside, guys, I will catch you in another tech video very soon. Actually, you guys are going to really enjoy the next video because we are going to go to Tokyo and we're going to be looking for some deals. And if you want to see the content as soon as it drops, then you know what to do, guys. Hit that sub button, ring that bell, and also let us know in the comments section below what you think of the Gaming Pro, the OC model here from Palit versus the Ventus 3X. I mean, me personally, if they were both around the same price range, it would be a no-brainer for me. I'd be picking the Palit Gaming Pro. As opposed to the Ventus, it is a small form factor ready model, so it will fit in some mini ITX builds, or actually a lot of mini ITX builds. And so hopefully if you came into this video with a lot of questions about these video cards, hopefully by the end of it, I've answered those questions for you guys. And with all that aside, I'll catch you in the next one very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.